Welcome back as we move on to discuss atmospheres in confined spaces. One of the greatest potential dangers in confined spaces is the lack of sufficient oxygen, or an oxygen-deficient atmosphere. It is important that you understand this condition. The air that we normally breathe is fresh air. Fresh air constitutes approximately, by volume, nitrogen 78.09%, oxygen 20.95%, argon 0.93%, and other gases 0.03%. Oxygen is the substance that keeps us alive, and should its proportion in air change for any reason, then there is risk to human life. Oxygen can be used up in many ways, and in a confined space, the following consumers of oxygen have to be considered: human breathing, natural decomposition of biodegradable matter, or the rotting of substances, the rusting of iron and steel, welding and flame-cutting processes, as mentioned earlier, and the operating of an internal combustion engine, such as might be used for a portable compressor or welding unit. Under normal outside conditions, all these processes and conditions would not result in an oxygen-deficient atmosphere, because the volume of air around us, and therefore the oxygen content, is vast. In other words, there is ample ventilation. However, in many confined spaces, there is generally very limited ventilation, and oxygen replenishment cannot be maintained as fast as it's being used up. The danger of this condition is that the airspace normally occupied by oxygen now becomes occupied by other gases, such as carbon dioxide, which results in a poisonous or toxic atmosphere as well. If the oxygen content of air in a confined space somehow drops to a proportion below 20%, then that atmosphere is considered to be oxygen deficient. When an atmosphere is oxygen deficient, then certain symptoms will be noticed in human behavior, ranging from rapid exhaustion, perspiration, drowsiness, coordination problems, nausea, unconsciousness, and finally, death. Where an oxygen-deficient atmosphere exists or is likely to exist, then a means of ventilating the space has to be provided, generally with the aid of a forced draft fan arrangement. The next possible atmospheric hazard we shall discuss is the possible presence of flammable gases and toxic contamination. Many gases are flammable, which means that they will burn, even explode, under certain conditions. Gases may also be toxic, meaning poisonous, and will cause us to become ill or even die if we are exposed to them. The common hazardous gas types that you are most likely to encounter include carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, sulfur dioxide, ammonia, and methane. Gases may be present in layers within the space. For example, hydrogen sulfide, being heavier than air, tends to collect in the lower areas of a space. Methane, on the other hand, is lighter than air and collects in the upper areas. Carbon monoxide has virtually the same density as air, and therefore this very lethal gas can be present throughout the space. A space can be contaminated with vapors and fumes, and these often toxic and explosive substances can present very serious problems. Vapor is the gas given off from a liquid as it evaporates. Vapors are released into the atmosphere when the temperature of a volatile liquid reaches its flash point. Typical substances that tend to release vapor are paint, paint thinners, adhesives, petrol, and any alcohol-based cleaning agent. Similar in effect to vapor are the contaminants we call fumes. Typical sources of fumes in confined spaces are welding processes, brazing and soldering, electrical fires where the cable insulation generates highly toxic chlorine-based fumes, and epoxy resins, normally associated with glass fiber work. Fumes are generally emitted from either combustion processes or chemical reactions. Fumes are less likely to present an explosive atmosphere, but can result in suffocation and poisoning. The next atmospheric condition we need discuss is that of dust. Dust is considered to be hazardous because it can impair vision, it can cause respiratory problems, and it may sometimes be flammable or explosive. You may be asking the question, when is the atmosphere in a confined space safe to go into? According to the regulation, a confined space may only be entered after the atmosphere in the space has been tested and evaluated, amongst other factors, for its oxygen content, the concentration below prescribed limits of any hazardous substances such as gas, vapor, dust or fumes. Under certain circumstances, where entry is imperative, but where the atmosphere is either oxygen deficient, or toxic, or flammable, then workers must take additional precautions such as the use of breathing apparatus. Only those trained in the use of such apparatus are permitted into such an atmosphere. We have overviewed some of the atmospheric conditions that could be present in a confined space. In the next section, we're going to look more specifically at combustible or flammable atmospheres.